Welcome back to We the People. In our last segment, we exposed how the Epstein case has split President Trump from parts of his base, his beloved MAGA, igniting a bipartisan push in Congress and triggering new calls for full transparency. But here's the question that still lingers. If the Department of Justice says there's no client list, and the court sealed the records, then why do so many Americans believe that a massive cover-up is still unfolding? We're peeling back that second layer of this scandal tonight. Not just what the government says, but how influencers, podcasters, so-called entertainers, and former law enforcement insiders have shaped the narrative, and sometimes at the expense of the truth that we are seeking. So let's start with the obvious. The Epstein story was never just about the facts. It became internet fuel. It was nuclear. Influencers, many with massive followings, took the reins after Epstein's death. They filled in the blanks. And when the facts got murky, they leaned into speculation. And one of the loudest voices, Dan Bongino himself, yes. Remember, before he became assistant FBI director, he was a podcaster. So who is Dan? A former Secret Service agent, conservative firebrand, and media figure with millions of listeners. Before taking his post as assistant director of the FBI, Bongino was one of the most vocal critics of the Epstein investigation. He regularly suggested, with confident, repeated rhetoric, that the DOJ and intelligence agencies were protecting powerful elites and they were committing a fraud upon the public. That messaging hit a nerve. It built public momentum, even when the evidence wasn't there. It never was. And let's be honest, it wasn't just Bongino. The podcast circuit, viral YouTube videos, countless X accounts turned Epstein's death into a genre of its own. Yes, that attention pushed the issue into the spotlight, but it also built public expectations that the law could never meet. I'm going to tell you right now, Pam, you were doomed from the get-go. Because here's the legal reality. No influencer, no politician, and no podcast can override what a federal judge has sealed. Not unless the media, the administration, our leaders, hell, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries petitions the court and demands that the court acts in unsealing these names. Of course, the victims' names have to be kept secret, but how about those of the accused? But then you have to remember, this is a slippery slope because you're opening up for conjecture and potential defamatory remarks. So let's talk about what's real. Again, Alan Dershowitz, Epstein's own former attorney, recently confirmed there was no organized client list. There was never a list. If there were, they would have used it as a bargaining chip. Yes, there were names. And yes, some individuals were accused during FBI interviews, but those names were never formally charged. There was not enough of a basis to charge those accused. And as a result, the accused lawyers requested that those names be sealed, that those court records be sealed and redacted. And why? Because in this country, uncharged allegations don't make you guilty. And if we start exposing names based on accusations alone, we throw out due process entirely. And guess what? Dan knew that. But he was a podcaster. So when are we going to start holding podcasters maybe to a higher degree of accountability? Because this is accountability. Because you see, podcasters are seen as entertainment. They're not seen as actual news sources. And you could say the same about me. But there should be some accountability. And I find it highly laughable that Dan Bongino, assistant director of FBI, started blasting Pam Bundy, our U.S. Attorney General, when he was the one who fueled all of this speculation. He was the one who gave the biggest amount of gas on a frickin' conspiracy bonfire. At the same time, the DOJ admits that over 1,000 victims were harmed. Over 1,000. It's undeniable there was a trafficking operation. It is undeniable that Epstein is the most vile, disgusting example of rotten evil. These were young ladies. These were young children. But one thing's for certain, and it has been denied up and down. There were no videos. There was no list. And at some point, these conspiracists have to end. But then again, we're still dealing with conspiracy theories from JFK's assassination in 1963, over 60 years ago. But then who do we look to for accountability? You do have a joint memo signed off by Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bundy, Director of FBI, and the Assistant Director of FBI. And it is even more interesting now. So let's say, yes, our congressional members, this administration, media can all file petitions with the courts in New York, the federal courts of New York, to see if they can get these records unsealed, at least for investigation of who is on the accused. Why aren't they doing that? But what's even more, I would say, worthy to examine further is how the MAGA movement is bigger than Trump. What is now is the realization is when Trump takes something personally, that is when he backlashes. He lashes out, and he's lashing out to his former supporters. Well, that could include Elon. And some are saying a lot of this backlash is because of the whole rift between Trump and Elon. But what it really is stating, just like the woke, progressive, socialist extreme on the left is bigger than Bernie Sanders, is bigger than AOC. See, AOC might be a mascot, a face of that, just like Trump could be seen as kind of like the mascot of MAGA, but he is not MAGA. And now he's starting to get that pushback. With Epstein is dead. Now, really, the question is, it's not whether he was murdered. Was there an assisted suicide? Because there are questions. How is it that you had the cameras going on and off, on and off? There's definitely questions as to why the guards left somebody who was on suicide watch. Or could there have been a little assistant saying, here you go, here's your sheets, go ahead, hang yourself. Ghislaine Maxwell is behind bars. Now, she's not speaking. She is not providing any names. Does she have any incentive to do so? No. And I assure you, as a criminal defense attorney, I'm sure those criminal defense attorneys would have used any bargaining chip to either get her a full immunity to turn state's witness or federal witness against the other accused, and also to get zero outcome or a lenient sentence. That did not happen. So let's look at those court seals. They stay. It's court ordered. Nobody has the authority to take those records, unseal them without the court's approval. And I think that's what's not being stated. So here's what I believe as an attorney, a citizen, and a woman. This isn't over, and it shouldn't be. Not if victims are being silenced. Not if public trust is still shattered. Not if the courts, the very system meant to protect justice, are sitting on sealed files that could help Americans understand the truth. But it still has to weigh the equities in balance, harm versus good. So, what do we need? A formal petition by the media to the courts demanding a review of sealed to unseal those Epstein records, not to violate victims' privacy, but to reveal who else was protected. Bipartisan leadership. Oh my God, couldn't that be a wonderful thing to see? Bipartisan leadership from both the administration and Congress to support that petition, not just politicize it, not continue on the road that we hate Trump, everything is evil of Trump, blah, blah, blah. And how about this? Dan, take some accountability about the fact that you were talking out of the side of your mouth when you were a podcaster, and maybe you have to uphold justice again. And there also has to be a reckoning with this influencer class, especially those who built careers on pushing the Epstein narrative to their financial gain. If you drove this outrage, you now have a duty to call for lawful disclosure, not more speculation. Let's be clear. This isn't about revenge. This is about trust. This is about providing the people what they want, but also holding people accountable. And the court has the power right now to restore some of it. Here on We the People, we don't chase conspiracy. We challenge power with facts. We'll keep tracking this Epstein fallout, the legal developments, and what our institutions choose to do next. Because if justice is real, it can't be sealed forever. We're going to be back right after this.